When I was a kid in the 80s, my dad kept telling everyone I was useless. I told him at least 31,000 times, "Dad, it's pronounced Ulysses." Later, I learned this was the Latin version of Odysseus, the ancient Greek hero of those oldest of Western epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Stories which recorded character archetypes and heroic plot devices which continue to frame some of our greatest stories 3,000 years later. The early 80s, when Ulysses 31 was first shown in Britain, was a muscular time. The tethers of the state were being cut. People were cast adrift in the growing yuppie pool of easy fast loads of money. IRA bombs lit up Belfast, London, even the very hotel one Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, was sleeping in. Riots, strikes, football hooliganism and the Falklands War. This was no time for the modern day religions of soy and wokery. As a mild-mannered boy who liked to hide away at times, rolling dice while reading fighting fantasy books, the Britain of the 80s was a terrifying place, where skinheads and punk remnants nutted brick walls in stinking alleys while trampling glass Lucasade bottles, needles and condoms underfoot. Aggression abounded everywhere. I remember two older boys, my next door neighbours, had dug a tunnel under their garden. Their form of fun was to force younger lads into it, cover the top with a sheet of cardboard, then cover that with earth. Sometimes they'd heighten the joy by telling said younger lads, "There's a bomb at the bottom." Suffice to say, there was no bomb in that pitch blackness, at least not one set to go off before 15 minutes, when invariably the older boys would let their captives out, laughingly claiming, "It's just a joke." Still, younger lads grow up to be bigger than the big boys sometimes. However, there was wonder for a mild-mannered boy in the 80s. Rival TV networks, BBC and ITV, competed for that valuable after-school 3:30 to 6 p.m. slot, and boy, were we given heroes aplenty. I'd like to talk about one of them. Now, as a young lad, I had to forgive the strange name of stranger-looking cartoon Ulysses 31. It simply didn't sound anything like Tom and Jerry, Popeye or the Flintstones, which were always on a perpetual rerun. But here, once I had taken my first tentative glimpses while hovering at the door so I could avert my eyes quickly away and escape, was a journey that never patronised its audience. In equal parts it mystified, discomforted, terrified and inspired. Here, in Ulysses 31, we have a joint project. French weirdness and panache with Japanese creativity and expertise. A Herculean labour of love. A children's cartoon about an ancient Greek myth. A what? So a cartoon about history and mythology? You mean a cartoon through which kids were not only deeply entertained but could learn some deeper truths about humanity? And not just that, it was set in the 31st century, a sci-fi Greek myth. This, dear listeners, is what childhood curiosity, wonder and adventure are made of. The cartoon broadened the world of its watchers. It set an example of behaviour that the world now has almost lost. Within the aggression and frustration of the early 80s, I found Ulysses 31, a story about the most cunning of heroes, lost in the abyss, haunted and tormented by quite terrifying and somehow intangible Greek statue representation of Olympian gods, with his son, an alien girl, a little robot and a cursed comatose crew. Ulysses soared through strange galaxies in search of Earth, flying into the night.
Mortals, you defy the gods? I sentence you to travel among unknown stars. Until you find the kingdom of Hades, your bodies will stay as lifeless as stone.
Ulysses, the way back to Earth has been wiped from my memory.
It was 1985 to 6 when you had the first airing of Ulysses 31 on children's BBC. I was about 6 years old at the time. A new cartoon with space stuff seemed pretty cool, since everyone loved Star Wars. Cartoons were just for kids anyway. In that case, Ulysses 31 should have been some space faff with goodies and baddies and spaceships and lasers and pew pew bang poof. Nothing wrong with that. Instead, the young viewer was inadvertently introduced to whimsical villains with twisted motivations. Introduced to epic storytelling from the world of Homer, or Kristin and, forgive my pronunciation, Mizares comics. There were of course shades of Star Trek and Star Wars, and it was all backed with the 1980 Flash Gordon film's space rock opera style soundtrack. With these apparent influences, how could a kid not be drawn into it all? Just imagine how something like this could fire the neurons in a growing brain. This was one of those moments which threatened to expand a mind, unlock avenues of thinking, light the mental touch paper of creativity. It was the very opposite of dumbed down. I have a feeling that if those who filled up the children's BBC scheduling block had actually watched Ulysses 31, they might have had second thoughts about screening it. Then again, in the 1980s, mature stories and events were often remade into daring cartoons which sought to ignite rather than dull imagination. We have Cities of Gold, D'Artagnan and the Muskehounds, and 80 Days Around the World, to name a few. I learned more about history and some of the literary classics from the cartoons I watched as a kid than through any type of schooling. One of the main reasons the show stuck with me and my friends was the constant challenging discomfort of its storytelling and tone. Episodes often had twisting plots, suiting the clever nature of Ulysses himself. Yet the feelings of bleakness and awaiting dread pulled me in completely. Compared to most other kids' shows, before and after, Ulysses unwrapped complicated story elements in a way much of its child audience could comprehend. Angry, booming voice gods played with time and space. Nothing was ever as it seemed. Ulysses' crew were not simply cursed to sleep until Ulysses found his way back to Earth. They floated upright, like corpses hung from a tree. They didn't breathe. As Zeus said, they were
lifeless as stone.
The universe of Olympus itself was populated with bizarre worlds and beings, most with unsettling secrets. This discordant, creepy factor set Ulysses 31 apart from other kids' shows. On a planet-sized hospital world, seemingly devoid of life, a ghostly hologram told all who might have the misfortune to visit,
"You must know the dangers that lie in wait for you if you remain."
Sure enough, danger grew from under the metal-plated surface. Deadly cyborg flowers sprouted to kill all intruders. In one episode, the magician in black, a strange figure introduced by a robotic, dog-flanked butler bodyguard, stuns our heroes with displays of space, time and matter-warping magic. A being who even the gods are wary of. A powerful, whimsical figure. I can't help but imagine the magician being the inspiration for Star Trek's Q. The magician frees Ulysses' crew, then, in typical horror film fashion, invites them to a long-tabled banquet where the price of his help is unveiled. You see, the magician is a slave master and a hunter. He longs to hunt man, the truly rare game. In the kingdom of time, a world of ever-passing seasons and ever-ticking clocks, Ulysses and his companions suffer under the speeding of ages. As a child watching this, I remember being deeply disturbed at the prospect of rapid aging. It meant one thing only: death. We see Ulysses' comatose companions turn grey in moments. The alien girl, Yumi, ages into the winter of her life, giving a final prayer before time takes her. And in the final episode, we find the shades of Hades with their backs turned to the living, but always moving closer, surrounding anything with the warmth of a beating heart, their touch ushering only cold death. What about how it all started in the first episode, when children are laid out as energy sacrifices in order to bring sight to the disciples of Cyclops? In fact, this cursory look makes me think, what the hell were the BBC doing, letting kids watch such scary stuff? But that is the post-millennium soy infusion talking. Ulysses 31 never sexualized its content. Kids were free to indulge their minds in tales of adventure, to indulge their child-born curiosity with thoughts of the wider world, not with a narrow obsession about the self. Handling everything respectfully, Ulysses 31 couched it all with a moral message of family, teamwork, courage, loyalty, ingenuity and integrity in face of adversity. You know, all those unfashionable things which long ago lifted nations and peoples from the struggle of nomadic and tribal subsistence living. Yeah, those bad things. The whimsical horrors of vengeful gods came close to overcoming the burning light of courage in adversity. Though fate itself seemed to lead to hardship and inescapable misery shown through the will of the gods, those who dared make their own fate could prosper. You just needed balls, and I don't mean that in a sexist sense. You needed the type of iron balls a certain Iron Lady had when she re-injected precarious ambition into old Blighty, while retracting the safety net of a union-lobbied state. You can hate or love the idea, but Ulysses 31 seemed to suggest that the only way to take on the conspiring fates was to conspire back at them. Even so, to stand up is to be hammered down. The magician who hunted Ulysses eventually freed him due to his respect for the courage and loyalty of Ulysses' companions. Only then did the butler bodyguard shoot a deadly arrow into his distracted master. Unveiling the trident symbol, the sign of Poseidon on his chest, we find out the god's plots ran further and deeper than we imagined. The defiant magician would defy the gods no more. Doomed to roll an ever-recycled ball of junk into a pit, Sisyphus never escaped his fate in Ulysses 31. Cronus, the king of time, desperate to please the gods who had exiled him, is eternally mocked without recompense. The universe of Olympus was utterly unforgiving, utterly compelling, to say the least. As I watched, drawn deeper by every episode, I imagined how Ulysses might escape all the impossible scenarios thrown his way, how, in the end, he must find his way home. I also imagined the waiting threats in this unsettling world, galaxy, universe. Nothing was sacred here. All characters were tempted to turn away from the cause of companionship at one point or another. But above all the characters, I had the deepest lingering suspicion about the Odyssey's ship computer, Shirka. Shirka perfectly framed the dangers of Ulysses 31. Lost as they were in the vastness of space, The bleakness was compounded by the computer's voice. A female HAL 9000 incarnate. What terrible circumstances could be ushered in if HAL and Shirker ever mingled circuits and spawned a monotone of doom? The stark female monotone of Shirker's voice offered no comfort to the crew. She was not a mother for sure. I remember always thinking that Shirker was plotting something because she unsettled me so much. I was certain she'd go bad at some point.
We are moving toward another unknown planetary system. Unknown. Unknown. Unknown.
Detoxifying the father and defying the gods. Thursday afternoons, sitting around the dinner table eating fish and chips after a hard day at primary school, I would watch Ulysses 31 with my younger brother and my dad, because my dad worked nights and my mum was out during the day at her work. I mention this since the much maligned institution of fatherhood is prominent throughout Ulysses 31, and this is where much of the modern so-called toxicity comes in. Ulysses is one of those pale folks from the Western literary canon. How the soy-infused must hate such a cultural phenom. Ulysses is just a load of stuff about masculinity and whiteness being presented as superior to the so-called weirdness of the places visited in the realms of Olympus. All those funky planets must be representative of colonised lands, right? I kid you not. Critical theory would, undoubtedly, come up with a similar tissue of madness. Telemachus, Ulysses' son, is blonde-haired, and he's styled like a mini Alexander the Great. It must be representative of the Nazis, some way, somehow. There are hardly any women in sight. Ulysses gets to go on exciting quests, while his wife sits back on Earth amongst warring princes while preparing a chili pepper lime avocado on toast brunch. But Ulysses is different to most heroes. A thoroughly positive representation of a man and father, though filtered through the lens of a cartoon, enjoyed by adults but made for children. Outside the tightly knitted odd family of Ulysses, Telemachus, Nono and Yumi, you could trust no one in the realm of Olympus, because when lost in space, without allies, where even the gods are against you, family mattered most, and more than this, a family protected by a father. Now, this is not a message we have seen portrayed in media for a very long time. Our bemulleted, high testosterone, fully bearded man Ulysses, fitted with jet belt, laser sword and energy shield, was action hero and action dad. Rushing to Earth to secure peace between warring princes and to return to his wife Penelope, herself diplomatically holding back the tides of possible conflict until then. Not a muscle-bound Chad or Hercules though, Ulysses' Chad days were definitely well behind him. Athletic, verging on cerebral, respect is given to Ulysses by virtue of his experience, achievements, authority, moral example and, above all, courage. He's not a bully, not a meathead. He is more Danger Mouse than Danger Man. Or should I say, He-Man. He is more John Rambo in Rambo 1, sneakily avoiding capture, than John Rambo in Rambo 2, who could take on nations. Ulysses wasn't about ending the Cold War or destroying the gods of Olympus. He frankly couldn't care what the gods got up to in their own parts of space. Ulysses' goal was to protect his people, his crew, friends, family, and to get back home to Earth. First and foremost, Ulysses is a doting dad, the opposite of a self-interested absentee dad, the dads we see and often are nowadays, let's be honest. After decades of a media normalising casual divorce, demeaning firstly fatherhood, then motherhood, the rot has eaten away at the notion of family as a pillar of society. Not here though. Ulysses delays the outset of his mission to throw a birthday party for his son. This is more important to him than spending time with petulant adult princes or watching the Olympics. These events are Ulysses's to savour. Because in an uncertain galaxy, circumstances are only what you make of them. Fatherly to his crew too, Ulysses calls them companions, a reference to Alexander the Great's most staunch soldiers. Ulysses is prepared to take any of the risks he expects his companions to take, right from the bat. He went after his son, Telemachus, when the boy was captured and set to be sacrificed to restore energy to the visions of Cyclops' disciples. When first encountering the curse of the gods, it is Ulysses who ventures into the iris of his ship to restore power while the gods engage in a tug of war with his destiny. We are not talking about an overpowered Gary Sue here, outnumbered and outgunned by the disciples of Cyclops. It is Ulysses' companions who take arms, land on the rogue Cyclops planet, and help Ulysses to escape. Later they do so again against the Black Magician. The crew are a mix of men and women, but they act as a brotherhood, sisterhood, brotherhood, let's say extended family where duty and honour are king. When confronted by Poseidon for killing the god's abominable creation, Cyclops, Ulysses is asked, "Who are you to defy the gods?" And man responds with his firm foundation of morality.
Not even a god has the right to steal a man's son.
Men, lambasted, degraded, put down and blamed for all of society's ills in today's politics and media, are losing their powers to shape the world in the best version of their image. It could be said in the early 80s that manhood had run riot. But, on the contrary, the manhood run riot of the early 80s was a statist manhood born of unions, strikes and consensus politics. Thatcherite Britain, for all its boons and woes, placed family before society. Ulysses 31 did just the same. A rugged bond between a father and son, a bond we find absent in today's representations of masculinity, was the only thing which could defy the gods and eventually triumph. There will always be only one Ulysses.